Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Today in Space. And today, this is August 24th. We just listened to NASA's press conference for Starliner and whether or not it would return crewed or uncrewed with astronauts Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore. And officially, after this conference, we found out that NASA has chosen for SpaceX's Crew 9 to return the crew, and Starliner is going to return uncrewed. But the overall idea here is that the thrusters are still too much of an unknown, and there is, within NASA, disagreements. But the system that NASA has in place over all of these years for the Columbia and Challenger accidents, even Apollo 1, and if we look at these disasters that happened, and there was a great clippable moment from the NASA administrator that talks about this. But the culture of NASA is allowing these voices that see something that others don't, or see something that they need to bring up. It's allowing for that. And that is what made this decision possible, is that those voices that had reasons to say, I don't agree with this, or there's other risks that are being assumed here that we don't believe are worth taking, it's being allowed to happen. And this to me is the nexus point for NASA, and this is great for the future. And if you're a fan of space in any way, I highly recommend listening to this whole thing, whether you're a casual fan or a space hardcore like myself. It is one of the great press conferences that I've seen from NASA, and the people, the leadership involved that were on this panel that had to deal with this situation and speak publicly about it. I'm very happy with where NASA is today and the decision that they made today for the future of human spaceflight. And NASA has a lot more risk to understand and to deal with and to take a look at that's bigger than what Boeing has, as they are a human spacecraft provider. You know, the NASA program and all of the lives that NASA have to account for on the space station, they're the ones that need to make that decision. And so what we're going to do is play a little bit of what we recorded while it was live. These are like the first 3 questions from the press, and they were very on point, and the answers were fantastic. So if you're looking for an update and where to listen to, this is it. But thank you for joining us. Again, another great day for space. Not an easy day. I have so much joy because, to me, this is what we need to see from NASA, this kind of leadership. And in this time that we live in, having any kind of leadership and leadership that is being mindful of the whole picture and the human lives involved, and saying, we have options. That's the whole point of this commercial crew program, is that we have options. And I think the right decision was made today. So it's going to be a field day in the press, but it's going to be really, really interesting moving forward. So let's dive in. Thank you for joining us. This is Today in Space.
This could be for Jim or Ken or Steve. I'll let you decide. My question is about trust. Space flight is a business that's built on trust. You trust that everyone's going to do their job. You have to have trust in all your space partners. Boeing essentially said, trust us. We have a spacecraft that is ready to return astronauts home. And NASA went in a different direction. So how now do you begin to rebuild that relationship of trust with Boeing?
You know, I'll start. I don't think it's a trust issue at all. I don't think we're rebuilding trust. I think we're looking at the data, and we view the data and the uncertainty that's there differently than Boeing does. It's not a matter of trust, it's our technical expertise and our experience that we have to balance, and I think Ken said it, we balance risk across everything, not just the Starliner piece. So I don't see it as a trust issue at all. I guess Ken or Stitch. Yeah.
Well, I would say that we've had a lot of tense discussions, right? Because the call was close, and so people have emotional investment in either option, and that gives you a healthy discourse. But after that, you have to do some work to keep your team together, right? To keep your team restored and ready for the next issue. And I'll acknowledge that we have some work to do there. It's pretty natural whenever you've had a difficult decision to make. But we're aware of it, and we'll work it. And we're committed to continuing to work with Boeing. Steve, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call it trust. I would call it a technical disagreement where we get a group of engineers together and they disagree on the risk level of what could potentially happen to the thrusters. Boeing did a great job building a model. Now, the question is that model good enough to predict performance for a crew? All the work we've done is really important also for bringing this vehicle back. We want the vehicle to come back uncrewed. It needs to land at the White Sands Space Harbor, which is where the opportunities are setting up in September. And all the work that we've done, both on the NASA and Boeing side, give us confidence to bring the vehicle back. It has to execute a deorbit burn. It has to do all the things we need it to do, undocking from the space station safely. So I think together we have worked toward that part. There's just a little disagreement in terms of the level of risk. And that's kind of where it got down to. And I would say, it's close. It's very close, and it just depends on, how you evaluate the risk. We did it a little differently with our crew than Boeing did. So.
And Mark, trust is a two-way street, and it's built upon a relationship. And I think, as indicated just an hour ago by the new CEO of Boeing, that they intend to move forward and fly Starliner in the future, which is very important to NASA, that we have two human-rated vehicles. I think you should understand the trust is two ways.
Eric Berger with Ars Technica. Two questions. One for the administrator, just to follow up on that question about Boeing and your discussion with the Boeing CEO, Kelly Ortberg. How do you anticipate that NASA can help Boeing get Starliner operational missions? Could you maybe fly like a cargo mission to support that, or just curious what your thoughts are on that? And then for, I think, Ken Bowersox, curious, when did you think it was likely that Crew Dragon would be the vehicle to bring the crew home, Butch and Suni? From the outside, it does seem like that you saw something perhaps in the White Sands test data that gave you concern. It certainly seemed like that's when the odds seemed to shift toward Dragon. Would love any insights on that. Thank you.
Your question to me is best answered by the people that are going to determine the specific testing and what is required before the crew would fly.
Yeah, I can take a cut at that, Eric. So we're going to sit down with Boeing and kind of lay out what's that path, right? I would say the White Sands testing did give us a surprise. We saw in that testing, as we did 5 total simulations with that thruster of a downhill deorbit burn sequence. And so that's when we saw this swelling of the poppet on the oxidizer side. In other words, a piece of Teflon that swells up and it gets in the flow path and causes the oxidizer to not go into the thruster the way it needs to go into. And that's what caused the degradation in thrust. When we saw that, I think that's when things changed a bit for us, in that now we know that's prevalent, and where is it prevalent in other thrusters, and then what could that swelling do in the future. So that's, I think, where we change course. What we have to do now moving forward for Starliner 1 is how do we avoid firing that thruster in a manner that would cause the heating that causes that oxidizer poppet Teflon piece to swell? Can we figure out how to do that with some testing? And can we also have learned recently that the environment in the doghouse, and I think I've talked about this, is hotter than we thought. In other words, when the other thrusters fire in a doghouse, some of that heat soaks back into an individual thruster, and that causes the Teflon to swell. It also causes some vaporization of the propellant. So is there a way we can figure out how to get the doghouse cooler overall? And then thirdly, we see crosstalk sometimes when an OMAC, the orbital maneuvering engine, the big 1,500-pound thruster fires, it then causes heat on one of the adjacent thrusters. So we've got to sit down and go through all those details with Boeing, with Aerojet. The teams have been so focused over the last couple months at understanding the physics and what's going on, which we have a much better understanding of that now. Now that we have that understanding of the physics, I think we can move forward and start to find mitigations for future flights. Let's see if Ken has anything to add.
Well, for me, the White Sands results I thought were a gift. It was just great to have that data. And I really thought it might help us convert. I've seen it with a few of our discussions where we have people in different camps on a risk decision. We gather more data, and then a piece of data comes in, and we come together, and everybody agrees that we take one path or the other. And I thought we might get there until probably about a week ago, I'd say. That's where it started looking like, hey, I just don't think we'll get there in time for bringing Starliner home in a timely manner. With more time, we might have gotten a lot smarter, but we're just at the point where we need to bring Starliner home, take all the data we can, and keep moving forward, I think.
Next question is from Marcia Dunn on the phone lines. Marcia Dunn from Associated Press.
Yes, hi. For you, Ken, I'd like a little more information on how the opinions were split. Was it 50-50, 75 to 25% in favor of SpaceX? If you could just characterize the numbers for and against, and also if you could discuss the mood in the room today. Thank you.
The polling was unanimous amongst all the NASA folks. Boeing expressed the ability to either work crewed or uncrewed. They believe in their vehicle, and they'd be willing to bring a crew home on it. We had some NASA folks that took a broader view of the global risks, who thought that, hey, we probably should keep the crew on the test flight. To say whether that was 15, 20% of the people, I'd have a hard time coming up with that number. But as far as the mood, all of us really wanted to complete the test flight with crew, and I think unanimously we're disappointed not to be able to do that. But that's part of the reason our system is set up the way it is, right? You don't want that disappointment to weigh unhealthily in your decision. And so on purpose, our system increases the volume on some of our voices from the technical authorities, folks that are asked not to think about those emotions, and it helps to pull you away from the fact that you might be disappointed in a certain decision, and then guide you towards that final outcome.
And I would add on the mood in the room, I think everybody is professional and did their jobs, but there is a sense of not accomplishing the mission that we set out to do. And even for myself personally, that is a hard thing to go through. It's a little bit of a situation of loss and feeling like you lost something. And we haven't, in the ultimate long-term view, we have not lost anything, because Boeing, as the Administrator Nelson said, is committed to finding the solutions and flying Starliner again. But I probably can't express in words what it's like when you commit to a mission, you've worked on a mission so long, and then we make a fairly dramatic change, which we have not done in human spaceflight in a long time. And so there's a feeling of loss, and we'll work with our team to make sure we talk about that and we move forward from here, because we need this team to focus not only on returning Starliner safely, but we have a Crew 8 mission to return and reconfigure. We have a Crew 9 launch coming up as well, and we need to focus on all those things. We have a really busy time frame, and we'll do that. We'll talk to the team and make sure they understand that it's nobody's fault, and it's a normal feeling to have this feeling of loss, or that you didn't complete what you intended to do.
And that's it, folks. That ends the questions that we had here. That frames up everything you need to know about this NASA Nexus point of Starliner coming home uncrewed and the crew safety being put over everything else, and SpaceX bringing them home. And I just have to say, if you've made it this far, thank you so much. You are awesome. And between you and me, it does feel pretty good to have guessed what NASA's move was on our last episode, the NASA Nexus point. And yeah, so feeling good about that. But in all seriousness, it just seemed like, from an engineer's perspective, which was our whole take on that episode, take all the emotion out of the relationships involved or program success. What's the right thing from a physics and a problem-solving perspective? And they just needed more time, and they didn't have it. So that's it. Thanks for joining us, folks. We'll see you in the next episode of Today in Space.